Good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Benoit, and we are the IT department for Something Natural. Tonight, we're going to talk about our IT infrastructure, what it is, how it works, and what it is we're doing as a company. Each person will go over a portion of what we've set up. Over the past 2 years, our company has gone from a small group of 20 people located here in Kansas City to over 300 employees in 3 locations. This increase in the number of users necessitated a drastic change in the infrastructure. Our home site is here in Kansas City, and we have added 2 other locations, Austin and Seattle. Why these cities, you may ask? These are both very prominent locations, as they have a very healthy and natural lifestyle that fit right with our company's vision. For the Travel Channel, they're both number 8 and 11 on the healthiest cities in America. To put everything together, at the beginning of this project, our network infrastructure was characterized as a simple work group. It was basically, if a file was needed, it was either emailed or shared on a local machine. The situation was risky, as some of those shared documents were vital to the operation of our business. These were not backed up in any way. The accidental deletion or failure of the host computer would have had a serious impact on our business. All computers were using a static IP address, which caused several instances of IP address conflicts when new computers were deployed to our users. We also had zero way to control the user environment. Users were allowed full administrator access to their computers. This setup allowed the introduction of all kinds of security and virus threats. So we would like to share with you how we've come to resolve some of these concerns. Please hold all your questions to the end of the presentation. Thank you. All right, to start us off, I'm going to talk about servers, RAID configuration, and infrastructure layout. A domain controller is a Windows-based server, which we have one at each location. What is a domain controller? The Kansas City domain controller is exactly how it sounds. It controls everything on the network. It's the central location that controls all users and units utilized in the Kansas City network. It's also our host domain controller that set up the forest or network for Something Natural using a tool from Active Directory called DC Promo. We chose to have a single domain forest with a domain controller in each location. This allows for speed of authentication as well as redundancy in the event that one location becomes unavailable. The domain controllers in our network are the centerpiece of our Active Directory service. Our domain controllers replicate with each other in case of any one of the domain controllers go down. Excuse me. We've had the Kansas City domain controller go down and lost everything, which is why we use the replication to not have that mistake again. A very valuable lesson. All servers are configured with a RAID 1 for their operating system volume. The file servers will have an additional volume which will be configured using RAID 5. RAID 1 and RAID 5 provide data protection in the event if one of the drives fail. We have routers in each location with a switch as well. A router is connected to the networks and decides which way to send packets. Having 3 locations, routers are warranted. Both the router and switch perform similar functions, but each has a distinct function to perform on our network. The switch connects the computers, servers, and printers within each location, and the switch allows each device to talk to each other efficiently. We also have file and print servers at each location, which is a computer attached to the network that's primary purpose is to provide a location for shared files, enable file replication, and manage shared files that can be accessed by every workstation on the network. Having 3 file servers, we utilize a program called DFS, Distributed File System, which will be explained in detail later, which makes sharing folders and documents much easier. The file servers will be on a RAID 5 configuration. Why are we using RAID essentially in the beginning? We're using RAID for data redundancy, fault tolerance, and performance improvement. Also, the IP infrastructure layout. Our IP scheme is on 192.168.0.0 with CIDR 24. Each location has about 10 subnets But we also have wireless subnets as well. The subnets for both wired and wireless are not all utilized as of yet. Why not? We have these all set up for projected growth. Now, to get more in depth about our IP information, next is Mr. Logan Wilkening.
Welcome everyone. Again, my name is Logan Wilkening. I will be talking about the IP scheme, IP addressing, DHCP, and DNS of the company. As the IT department, if something natural, we would like to ensure that the employees of the company have an understanding of the IP scheme. Not just that, but what their departments are assigned as the IPs, is their IP scheme, including restrictions. Here's a basic breakdown of some of the devices that we use per location. Obviously, you have your router per location, Kansas City, Seattle, Austin, domain controller up there, the IP scheme, which is a classless IP, and then your domain controller, your file share, router, printers, switch, and then the offsite backup. Down here we've got the static IP pool for the VPN. We wanted to allow for growth. That's why we have so many down there. The .221 to 251. Next is showing just a little bit of the exclusions that we had set up, as well as the reservations. Just a quick little breakdown showing you what we had set up on our system. The exclusions from 2.201 to 254 for Kansas City, Austin, and Seattle, as well as our split scope for each location, and then the printers, reservations, and MAC addresses. Next, I'm going to talk about DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. A communication protocol that lets network administrators centrally manage and automate the assignment of IP addresses and organization of networks. A little example for you, Kansas City's domain controller just sending out IP addresses to the users in the office so they can basically do their day-to-day work. Next, we're going to go into DNS. Obviously, DNS is a domain name system. This system by which the internet domain names are and addresses are tracked and regulated. Name resolution. Again, a small example in here showing the client sending out a request, which then the client to the DNS cache, which then the DNS server will either return information known as iterative queries, or it will respond with name failure. So again, the client sending out to the server, which then sending out to the internet, route down to your top level, then acquiring the main information and sending it back to the client. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Dominic Grayson. Thank you.
Thanks, Logan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dominic Grayson, and I will be talking about Active Directory, our organizational units, and our naming of our objects. Okay. First off, I'm going to start off with pretty much what is Active Directory. Pretty much if you can imagine just your resources or what a address book is that has names, phone numbers, every piece of information. That's what Active Directory pretty much is. Okay. It does a lot of other things as well, including it manages and stores our information and resources. It also authenticates and authorizes users to access our network. Okay, so previously we had none of these things, so pretty much our marketing team was accessing files that they should not have been doing, vice versa with our IT department. But now we have a uniform address template and address station where everyone has those things that they need. Okay. So what makes up Active Directory as well is organizational units. Okay, so this will be considered the smallest group that we can apply group policy settings to, and group policy settings will be explained later by one of my colleagues. It also delegates administrative authority, and those things will be explained once again later in our presentation. The objects are considered pretty much any computer resources or users. It's just also another element that's a part of Active Directory as well. It's pretty important. It helps just centralize and keep everything organized and neat. Okay. So the next few slides actually have a diagram of what our unit pretty much looks like. As you can see here, we have sn.local as our domain, and we have one OU structure that is actually replicated between all three sites. Okay. Active Directory is also backed up by the sites that we've set up for each location. So in case one domain does go down, we still have an address book at each location. So we won't have anything that will stop that or stop business. Okay. Another way to imagine it is, as well, is if you were to log into a computer in Kansas City with your credentials, you could also go to Austin and log into that same network, and be able to do work as well, and we won't be able to stop business in case something happens. Okay. We decided to name some of our sites executives so they can have specific authorizations. HR can have theirs, so can IT and Order Desk and some other ones. Okay. This is what our users look like. These are considered objects. We're going to talk a little bit more about how that is we're actually put into place here in the next few slides as well. And we also decided to give our computers special authority as well, just for added security. Okay. But next, I'm going to ask Chris and talk about how we actually added all of these OUs and our users using PowerShell. Chris.
Thank you. All right. My name is Chris Edgar, and I'll be talking to you a little bit about PowerShell and how I used it to add the organizational units, groups, and users to our Active Directory structure. Okay, there are two ways to take care of administrative tasks in Windows. First way is the most common way, using the GUI, graphical user interface, which is fine for adding adding one or two users or making small changes here and there. But when you're asked to add 300 or more users, going through the GUI can take quite some time. So that's where PowerShell comes in. It's a command line shell and scripting language designed specifically for system administration. It's similar to the command prompt that you're used to, but it has a lot more functionality, a lot more. They call them commandlets instead of commands. But those are used to basically administer every aspect of the Windows environment from a command line or through a script. Okay, so as I said, creating two users or groups is most efficiently done through the graphical interface. But if you need to add more than that, it can become a little cumbersome, take a lot of time. This is where PowerShell comes in. So using a relatively simple script and a file that I created in Excel called a CSV file, separated variable, which is just an example done here. I can take all this information given to me in this CSV file and run it through my script, and it will add, in a matter of seconds actually, all of our OUs, organizational units. So as we saw in Dom's slide, we have executives, HR, IT, sales, marketing, shipping, and order desk. And underneath those we have the users, OUs, and computer OUs. Like I said, I just started this script, and we were at OUs. Same thing for the groups, the global groups and the domain local groups. Simple script, little CSV file that I created using Excel. Our global groups, we decided we're going to use the naming convention. We would have global groups, would be started with a GG, executives, and then the domain local groups, which you use to assign permissions to files and folders, would have a DL for domain local, and then read only and read write. Probably take note of that. You get another script. The big one, the one that would actually take a long time, is to add all the users, and this is my script that I created to do that. Again, I used every department has a separate CSV file with all the usernames, or all the users' names, and the username we decided we were going to use numbers instead of usernames, just kind of a security thing. Anyway, this CSV file here will be used by my script. It asks you a little bit of information, and in a matter of seconds, really, maybe a minute, you have created 300 users, and they've been placed in their respective OUs and global groups. So that was how we quickly added our users, groups, and OUs. So we're going to use PowerShell. With that, I will turn it over to Lauren Sweeney. She will talk about group policies.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Sweeney, and I will be talking to you about our group policies within Something Natural's structure. You can see here with our group policy object is the essential way that most settings are enforced on a computer. They store the policy settings, but they do not become active until they are applied. Basically, GPOs are the most simple and effective way to configure user and computer settings that are on networks based on the Active Directory domain service. GPOs can also apply either to the computer or the user. One that applies to a computer will be enforced on any user of the computer, and one that applies to the user will be enforced for that user, no matter what computer he or she logs on to. We said, why did Simply Natural implement GPOs in the first place? To provide a more secure and controllable environment, naturally. Nothing will really properly function if there's no type of structure. And how is this beneficial to us? GPOs are also meant to automate the settings of a computer and does all the work for the admin. As you can see here, we have an example of our group policy structure, and we decided to implement 15 different GPOs that will later be linked to the respective OUs. We've created each specific GPO to be assigned to each department to manage the user environment. Each department OU has its own drive so that each particular group can access their specific drive. Here's an example of the GPOs that we've assigned to the executive department. We found it necessary to configure these GPOs to keep each department as secure as possible. With that being said, as you can see some here, like the remove access to control panel. What that does, it keeps the users from changing the settings on their computer. Also, we have the My Documents folder redirects. Any documents on a centralized server can be backed up or redirected to another server. With the command prompt, no one is allowed to run batch or command files, which can change the settings of a computer. They also control different areas of the computer as well. With the remove access to registry edit, so they can't make any registry changes to their computer or profile. And another would be the removable media access. This can apply to all forms of removable media, not just USB. This pertains to CDs and DVDs as well, and they can be blocked. Now, we wanted to become more extensive with our password policy. It's 10-character complexity. You want to have lowercase, uppercase, numbers, letters, or characters, so forth. It has an age password of 60 days, and you cannot use your last 10 passwords. Why do you not want to do this? Because by doing so, you're decreasing your chances of keeping your information secure. You never want to become repetitive in your actions when you do these type of things with passwords. Now you have to know after 3 unsuccessful attempts of trying to log in with an incorrect password, you will be locked out. After that has happened, you need to contact your IT personnel, and at that point we'll remote access in and reset that password for you. Now once we reset that, you cannot change that password again until after a 3-day duration. You can't just continuously keep changing that password. Now we took it a little step further with our somewhat, might we'll call it fine-grained password policy. By default, Windows 2008 only allows 1 password per policy through the domain group policy. And what we use is the ADSI, which is known as the Active Directory Service Interface. So that way the IT personnel can log in. We have a special password, which will be a 12-character complexity that we have to change every 30 days. So we thought that would be pertinent to operations of GPOs as well. But that's all I have for you guys this evening on GPOs. Now I'm going to turn it over to Chris Rodriguez, who's going to talk to you about our remote access, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Rodriguez, and I'm going to be covering routing and remote access, virtual private network, and remote desktop protocol. Because as you can see, we have all this great information, but we need to have some ways to access it and also keep it secure. Starting with routing and remote access, configuring RRAS allows our company to access resources throughout a LAN or WAN environment. If a router fails, we use RIP configuration because if a router does fail, they can still talk to each other with no downtime. It's dynamic. We don't have to go through and change anything. Using a static configuration, which we chose not to do, across the network can be burdensome when it comes to company growth, as we have to constantly go in and make changes that we really don't want to have to make. This is a slide of RIP configuration. As you can see, we put it on both the internal and external routers in our configuration. Next is virtual private networking. What VPN does is it allows a remote user to log into the domain and pretty much continue to work from a remote location. Say we have an executive who is in Chicago but has a little bit of work to do, they can remote in through VPN to gain access to their files and continue their work. With VPN, we use IPsec with LTTP with IPsec with the pre-shared key. We chose to use IPsec because it's easier for the end user. They don't have to think about it. All they do is go in and enter their domain credentials, and they're good to go. So it's very little information that the end user has to know about it. We did choose to use a pre-shared key, which this, of course, is not the pre-shared key we chose to go with, but it's just an example. So that also makes things a little more secure. We can go in and set up the password for users to have to use in order to gain access to VPN. And we also did use a few VPN policies. As you can see, we get an idle timeout of 10 minutes. Basically, if somebody who is remoted in through VPN, if they remain idle for 10 minutes or more, they're going to be kicked off the system and they're going to have to re-authenticate after those 10 minutes elapsed. Whoops. We also allowed 24-hour access Monday through Friday. And the reason why we did that is because we only allowed IT and management personnel to be able to use the VPN protocol. We feel that with these two groups using this, things are still going to stay pretty secure. Therefore, we can allow 24-hour access. On the next few slides, you're going to see those policies in action. So there's the idle timeout. Once again, after 10 minutes, you're going to have to re-authenticate. Day and time restrictions, once again, that Sunday is supposed to be all blue right there. But 24-hour access Sunday through Saturday. And there is the groups. Here is an example of just the executive VPN allowing, of course, IT is going to be in there as well. But there you can see you can actually go through and add specific groups to VPN policy to allow them to be able to use that protocol. And here we have the ports property page. We reduced the number of available ports for L2TP to 10. And then we also reduced all others to 0, except for PPOE. It's default by 1. You can't change it. But reducing the ports to 10 and 0 keeps things more secure. As you know, the more windows you have in your house, it makes it easier for somebody to break in. Well, we reduced the amount of windows in our house, so it makes it hard for somebody to break in. And with that, we use IPsec with VPN. As I mentioned earlier, it's easier for the end user. But IPsec secures our network with source authentication, data integrity, and data confidentiality. Source authentication is essentially proof that the user and the computer are exactly who they say they are. Data integrity is verification that the information received is the exact same as the information that is sent. So if you have a change in a packet or change in information, it's going to drop the VPN connection and you'll have to re-authenticate. And then data confidentiality mitigates the chance that information can't be accessed by unauthorized users. And the cool thing about IPsec is that it uses, or LTTP, is that it uses a tunnel mode. Here you can see a little graphic of that. This will be the tunnel, which is pretty much the main barrier of any information that's in there. And then also, any information within that tunnel is encrypted, so if somebody was to gain access, it's essentially useless to anybody who has that. It's going to take a really long time to figure out what is in there. And then finally, the third protocol, which is remote desktop protocol, it's essentially something that allows the IT users to go in and remote into a user's computer to make changes, troubleshoot problems, and help get them back up to working speed. And it increases efficiency and decreases downtime by allowing us to quickly fix problems within the organization. IT members are able to log into computers on site or at a remote location. So say you have that remote user in Chicago who's having an issue with their computer. We just go in, remote in with their IP address, and we help them troubleshoot and get them back up and running. So in conclusion, RAS, VPN, and RDP helps keep everyone connected, but we need to have these things to access. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Mr. Chris Baker to talk to you about our file system.
Hi everybody, I'm Chris Baker. To start off with, what is DFS and why do you need to know another acronym? DFS is actually distributed file system. It's a role set up on a server and its intention is to take shared files and folders and share them out across our network. The reason that we did this was to set up data redundancy, file protection, and increase the accessibility. Instead of having one server that would hold all of our files, now we've shared it at each location so that you have a local server that you can draw your files off of. Each department has its own share. Our namespace, SNDFS, shares out folders like IT and shipping, and so forth. We created folders or shares on the servers, and we use it to increase the ability to share out information. So if one department, such as your marketing department in Kansas City, is working on a big project and we'd like to share it with another location, all you have to do is save it and share it out from there, instead of having to email it or go to a certain server to pick it up. It decreases the amount of traffic on our wide area network. That way we don't have as much, there's no latency on it, and it increases your efficiency to do your job. We're implementing read-only replicated folders. The idea behind this is if you're working in Kansas City and someone else is trying to open up the same file that you're working on, all they're going to be able to do is open a read-only copy. This makes it possible so that if you are making any changes, you're not fighting someone for control over the file. That said, if you do go to another location because of group policy and your credentials, once you log in, you will have the same rights to access the file at any location. We took special care when it came to replication. DFS is replicated on an hourly basis. We took the main part of our working day, we cut off 4 a.m. until 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, and cut down the amount of bandwidth that DFS is going to use to 2 megabits per second. The rest of the off hours, which would be anytime before, and then Saturday and Sunday, it takes up all full bandwidth to do replication. We did this so that while you are working, you're not being bogged down with any more internet traffic, any more network traffic than what you would already be experiencing. Where are your shares located? Your home folders, my documents, my pictures, they're not in Kansas anymore. They're on a server shared out to each location. we took your home folders and we shared them into a folder on the network, on the file server, in a folder called data. It's accessible to every person from every location. What this does is it takes your important information, things you might be working on and not necessarily are sharing out in the normal shared folders, and puts it into a folder off of your computer. If there's any type of natural disaster, if there's a fire, something happens to your hard drive, it goes out. Once you save those files, they're already on the server. So you don't have to worry about, hopefully you shouldn't have to worry about too much data loss that way. Because we do care about your data, it's the most important thing to us. This is just an example of the GPO for the home folder redirect. Lawrence kind of talked about that already, just to show you guys. With all that information, we do care about space, and disk quotas are something that we are going to mention, and my friend Chris Edgar is up next to talk to you about that. Thank you.
I'm back. Chris Edgar. Okay. All right, as an IT department, we want to keep track of and limit what is stored on our servers. By limiting what and how much is stored, we can minimize our exposure to potentially malicious files and software. We also make sure we are utilizing our server space as efficiently as possible. To do that, the first tool is called disk quotas. It's used to track and control disk space usage for shared folders and volumes. In our environment, as Chris said, we set up, we've got the My Documents folder on the user's desktop is actually redirected to our file shares. We decided that we were going to put a hard limit of 200 megs of data on their My Documents folder. That would allow them to save documents that they're working on that aren't ready for general distribution or presentation. But they have a 200 meg limit, as I said, on that. This quota tool will allow us to email, or automatically email the user when they reach 85% of their quota, then again at 95%, and again at 100%. Now when the user reaches 100%, they will no longer be able to save any more data until they clear off some of their files. That's what a hard limit is. Now we also have the departmental shares. Each department has a different shared folder on our server. We also want to limit what and how much. Actually, we just want to monitor what and how much is saved to those folders. So each department is going to be assigned a quota based on their present and projected need. Right now, we set it to about 2 gig, and we will monitor it through disk quotas. If they need more space, we can assign that as necessary. Those are soft limits. Means when they reach their 2 gig or whatever limit we put on there, they're not going to be limited, but it will, the administrator and the department manager will be emailed over there when they can evaluate their space needs at that time. Now, the second way we control what is on our file server is by using file screening. And these two are accessed through the file server resource manager. File screening, it controls the types of files that users can save to the file server. Right now, we decided to allow them to save only Word, Excel, and PowerPoint documents. There can be exceptions allowed on a case-by-case basis, so if our marketing people need to have pictures, they can do that. And we will be explicitly blocking audio and video files, so no MP3s, no movies, or whatever. This is a screenshot of the file screen properties. Here we show that we're blocking the audio and video files, and you can see that there's quite a few other items that you can block from being saved to the file share. You can also highlight any one of those and click the edit button there, and it will give you all of the file extensions that will be blocked from the server. Such as MP3, like I said, MP3. But anyway, that's how we're going to control what is our space and what is saved on the servers. So now we'll turn it over to Derek Allen and let him talk about backup and shadow copy.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. I'm Derek Allen, and I am going to be explaining to you tonight our plan for our backups and shadow copies in case of a disaster and we need to recover our system and files. First, basically to give you a background of what a backup is within a network environment like ours, is a function that we can save our data and our entire system to off-site or on-site servers, just in case anything happens. Right now, we're going to discuss how we went about scheduling, how we configured the backup, and the locations of where we put our backups. We chose at each site, Kansas City, Seattle, and Austin, on our domain controllers and our file servers to hook up external hard drives. And what we're going to do is we're going to implement Windows Server Backup so we can run a full system backup to our domain controller and file servers. We're going to use a target file on a shared volume. Here's an example of a target address. We can also put that in command line using WB admin commandlets if we need to in PowerShell. Here's an example of how we went about running the same type of operation on our offsite backup. We have chose each city to have an offsite server, for example, in a cave or a storage facility, and we're going to connect to those through the internet. And it's the same concept. We run a target file on a shared volume on this server here, and then we went through and selected custom, so we can go ahead and enter that ourselves and tell it where we want it to go and how often we want it to go. Here we have selected a bare metal recovery. When you check this box here, it's going to go ahead and fill in all these right here. That way our data and our entire system is going to be backed up when we run our backups in the evening time. Speaking of the evening time, we have gone domain local time at each site. We are going to run a full backup at 10:30 every day, Monday through Friday. Here is an example of how I chose to select my target folder. We'll go here. And once the backup is complete, you can see here there is a last backup. It shows that everything went through okay. And then here we have a next backup window as well that shows that everything's scheduled for the following evening. You're probably saying to yourself, Derek, that sounds really great and awesome that you guys are backing up the entire network. But what happens if I delete a file and I need to get to it right away and we don't want to have to wait on the entire system to back up? Well, we have decided as a team to go with running a shadow copy on all systems. This way we can recover your files that within the last 3 hours and go back to a recent version. That way your entire work isn't completely lost. Now I'm going to show you a couple slides of how we can go about and do that, or what we chose to do. We chose our S drive, which both Chris has mentioned earlier, which is our shared volume. Then from there, we went in and made our schedule for 9 a.m., 12 p.m., and 3 p.m. So every 3 hours throughout the workday, we're going to run a shadow copy of the entire system. And basically what that does is take a snapshot of your guys' files throughout the day. And again, we're going to run that Monday through Friday. And with 3 easy clicks, you all can access your files, make a copy of them, and get back to work without even having to contact the IT department. So we were thinking about you guys on that end as well when we decided to do the shadow backup. And with that in mind, I have talked about our plan for recovery in the event of a natural disaster. I'm going to hand it over now to Mr. Andy Gott, and he's going to explain how we secured our entire network.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew Gott. I'm going to be covering the firewall and security portion of our presentation. The things that I will be covering within my part of the presentation is why a firewall is important, the primary functions of the firewall, the techniques that we use to help secure the firewall, process that we use to set up those techniques, not too in-depth, but well enough to give you a good understanding of why we set it up the way we did. So, let's get right into it. Why is a firewall important? Well, it's the first line of defense in any network security infrastructure. I mean, I know when I get a computer and I know I'm going to get on the internet with it, first thing I think of before I get on the internet is, well, is my firewall set up? What is the primary function of a firewall? The primary function of a firewall is to keep unwanted intruders such as hackers with malicious intent, sending adware and things of that nature. Also, it keeps your end users in line, people within the company, from accessing untrusted or unwanted sites such as social media, i.e. Facebook or YouTube. All right. So, these are the three techniques that we use to help secure the firewall. Through policy, won't go too in-depth into that because that was already covered, but I will be showing an example of it later on. Packet filtering. Packet filtering consists of the firewall examining data packets coming into the firewall, and it says pretty much here and there, according to the security settings or policies configured on the firewall or used in GPO. The way that it does this is it looks at the data packet source, the data packet IP address, and the port of which it went through. Port filtering. Port filtering is the process of selectively turning on or off ports in the firewall, such as transmission control ports or UDP ports. This particular slide you'll see here, this is the group policy part. We set up a group policy GPO. These are the settings that we used within group policy to help secure the firewall. Protect all networks, which pretty much means that any computer or server connected on the network, that user will not be able to go into the settings of the firewall and turn it on or off. So, firewall do not allow exceptions. Basically, that blocks any unsolicited or unwanted traffic through the firewall. Following is a list of ports that were used by our firewall or turned on. I'm only going to cover 3 for time's sake, also because previously most of the definitions of these acronyms were already covered, such as DHCP, DNS, RDP, and IPsec. So, port 25, simple mail transfer protocol. Pretty much covered, if you were to disable that, you would not get any outgoing email. Port 80, hypertext transfer protocol. If you were to disable that port, you would not have internet access. Port 443, hypertext transfer protocol secure. If you were to disable that, you would not have secure internet access. On the following slides, I'm going to take you through the process that we use to open up a port on the firewall. Not too in-depth, mind you. In this particular process, this was used on a Windows 7 client machine. It's also important to know that the inbound rules was the only rule configured, the inbound rules was the only process used. I won't be showing an example of the outbound rule. And if you were to use a Windows 2008 server, it would be quite a bit more of a complicated process. So, as you see by the arrows, we had to select inbound rules. We select a new rule. From there, it took us to the new inbound rule wizard screen. we want to go ahead and open up a port, so we select port. All right, from here, gives us two options to select what type of port that we wanted. This particular instance, we wanted a TCP port. And we have to give the number of the port that we needed, 3389, the remote desktop protocol port. Right, in this screen, we have to select the option of what type of network infrastructure this rule would apply in. And we selected all three. Right, in this particular slide here, you can see the fruits of our labors after we've gone through that process. The remote desktop port is now open. And yeah. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Andrew Twilling.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, so as you can see, we've come a long way. We began with a distributed, unsecured network without any centralized management, without any way to control and secure sensitive or vital data. We now have a robust environment with many security features. We also have eliminated the possibility of data loss or corruption due to accidental deletion or hardware failure. Thank you very much for your attention, and now open up the floor for questions.